such a monster. He could die here, but he would hold on until all the inhabitants were saved. The swordsman looked resolutely at the monster and squeezed the handle of his weapon. The protagonist was floating away on a raft. He was breathing heavily and muttering that he was not the only protagonist in this novel, and it did not matter how many RP he had if they all went to construction. The young man frowned and said that he was also a human, and it hurt him to see how cities were destroyed and people suffered, but he was running away because he could not do anything. Lloyd stopped and fell silent. He looked down sadly and thought about what would happen if he allowed the city to be destroyed and ran away. The boy froze. Finally, he gritted his teeth and, frowning, shouted to Belle that they were coming back. The snake used volcanic eruptions, and the brown-haired man sat on top of it. The young man's face distorted with rage, and he promised that he would make this lobster bastard dance for him yet. Xavier swung with a cry. The monster also went on the attack. The swordsman dodged and gritted his teeth, using an explosive technique. The knight decided that the eyes were a weak spot for any living creature. He jumped up and struck with his blade, but it did not work. The enemy waved his mustache and was about to hit the blonde. The guy froze, looking at the approaching attack. Hippo, one hit. The animal flew up and crashed into the monster. The monster fell, crashing into a building, and the hamster shrank and landed on the protagonist's head. Lloyd armed himself with a shovel and hissed that the enemy should not touch his money. The hero stood on one of the roofs and watched the monster crawling on the ground. Xavier raised his blade above his head, gritting his teeth, and thought that this was the right time to strike. The claw was supposed to cut the swordsman and was heading towards him, but he managed to hit it with the blade and push away. Realizing that he had not dealt any damage, the blonde was at a loss and did not understand why it did not work. Jumping back to the ground, the key figure of the novel pulled the blade behind his back while the monster was running towards him, and thought that it was difficult to find an area for an effective attack and the chances of winning were not so obvious. However, Xavier grabbed the blade tighter and his anxiety somehow disappeared, leaving him perplexed. Looking at his master, who was